Hi, I'm Rachel St. Germain, and welcome to Unmasked. In this video, I'm going to be talking on grief and how grief does not mean that we are lacking of faith. In case you're wondering, no, I'm not always going to be talking about grief or anxiety. It just so happens that I've been talking a lot on this subject matter because it's in the air right now. It's a lot of what we're facing, and it's a lot of that uncomfortable stuff that's popping up for all of us. And I want to talk about it just because I think that there is so much benefit in not trying to avoid the uncomfortable emotions or trying to distract away, but really using this time as an opportunity to gear ourselves up for, strengthening that feeling muscle where we can actually see uncomfortable emotions rise up, and they're not so scary because we realize if we lean into them, we can ride them out. We've got it in us to do that. And they're honestly, in time, like as you start to actually feel what you're actually feeling, you'll see that no matter what we feel, it's just a feeling. Nothing is fatal. Feelings can't kill us. All they do is come and go, and they are information to tell us something that we can learn about ourselves, and we can use it as an opportunity to grow. So anyway, with that, I just want to jump into this video's subject of grief and how it does not mean disbelief. I'm going to be touching on 4 main points. The first being how it is so important to be honest with how we truly are feeling. Second, how grief is a feeling that is natural for most of us, and it does not mean that we lack faith. Thirdly, I want to touch on what it looks like to get honest with God, give you an example of how you can do this and what it actually looks like. And then fourth, I want to give you some tools that you can take with you to implement this process of getting present with yourself, understanding what you're really truly feeling, working through all of the messy emotions with God, and just being okay in that mess, in that messy muck of emotions. Okay, so first of all, why it is so important for us to feel what we're really feeling. I think emotional awareness is so important because if we do not face the things that come up that are uncomfortable, but instead choose to cope or chase them away with distraction or numb them or push them down and suppress them or pretend they're not there, it just trains our brains that uncomfortable emotion, I need to make it go away as soon as possible, and we end up running away from them, and it builds this habit within us where anytime it pops up, we distract, we numb, we cope, we don't really feel what we're feeling. And in time, what happens is we start to become numb. We think we're protecting ourselves by not feeling what we're actually feeling, but actually we start to not only numb what's bad, but we numb what's good as well because we want to protect ourselves. As Brene Brown says in her books of the Gift of Imperfection, we cannot selectively numb our emotions. So when we are numbing the bad, we're always numbing the good as well. And in my own life, how this came to light, I used to run from my emotions. Anything that felt scary or made me feel panicked or anxious or not good enough, or if I felt unwanted, whatever it was, all the emotions that made me feel, I don't like this, I want to get away from this, I would just reach for whatever I could to get me back to happy. Chasing the fun, chasing the happy, as I used to say. I just wanted to feel good. I started to label uncomfortable as bad, and because of that, I started to find ways to numb myself to those bad emotions. But in time, what happened was I started to lose my ability to feel joy as well. I wasn't as happy, and unfortunately in my story, my numbing, my reaching for trying to numb away those uncomfortable emotions led me to an eating disorder. If you're more interested in hearing more on that, you can check out my blog, Rachel St. Germain. And under my story, there's a post about my ruin to redemption story. But anyway, back to the importance of feeling our feels, not only is it important to get honest with what we're actually feeling, but I think when we aren't able to be honest with ourselves or understand what we're feeling, we also can't be honest with God. And true intimacy with Him requires honesty. Think about it. If you have a friend and you can only show up and say the right things, or you're afraid of what you share about your life because you're scared if you show up as your real self, that they might think you're not as cool, or that they don't want to be friends with you. I mean, what kind of a friendship is that? Like, it's the friendships that you truly feel safe and secure in are the ones where you can show up with all your mess and really tell the true story, and they don't run from you, but they sit with you in it. That is the kind of relationship we want to have with God, which is why it's so important to be honest with not only ourselves and let ourselves feel what we're actually feeling, but also to get intimate and close with God. Like, we need to be honest about what's really going on. So, secondly, I wanted to just touch on the fact that grief is not a lack of faith. In fact, I think it's the opposite. By grieving and inviting God into our grief and saying, I'm really hurting right now, or working through the various stages of grief. So for example, one of the stages of grief is anger, and just saying, God, I'm really angry that this is going on, or working through my angry questions that I have, like, does this mean that you're not a good God, that this is going on? I know in my mind I'm not supposed to think that, but is this true? And in my years of going through this journey with God, through eating disorder recovery and just really building this emotional awareness, I've learned that I can come to Him with anything. I have come to Him kicking and screaming and grieving the part of my life that I'm going through, wishing away what I had, like pleading for Him to rescue me from my hardship, even though I knew in my mind, hardship makes you stronger, like all the things that I knew I should be thinking. But when I was able to just really get honest with God and say, like, I hate this. I know that you say that it is for my good, but I'm really having a hard time seeing the good in this, God. In those moments, I just felt this closeness. I felt peace wash over me, as I could just, wow, I can show up in front of God. And in those moments, I can't explain it or put it into words exactly, but I just remember feeling so held and so seen. So, those moments where it feels like no one can understand God, and He pulls you close and says, I understand. And it just those few words, how much healing and like warmness it brings to your soul. So I don't know where you find yourself with grief, or where, if you're comfortable with being honest with God, but I just really want to encourage you that if you are feeling a sense of, oh no, I can't be grieving, because if I'm grieving, that means then I'm not trusting God, or, oh, God is in control of all things, so I need to trust Him. And that's true. It doesn't negate the fact that this is hard and you're probably feeling angry and sad and all the other things in between. And God doesn't want us to come all clean up and tidy, but He wants us to be ourselves. And to be honest, He knows everything anyway. So if we're not being honest with God, we're just really not being honest with ourselves. So, friend, I'm encouraging you in this time to really just lean into God and lean into the closeness. But what does that look like? What is an example of this, getting raw and emotionally honest with God? I want to turn us to Psalm 13:1. This is a psalm from David where he is just in the throes of grief and despair, and he is coming to God. And I just love this. I'm going to read the verse 1, Psalm 13, verse 1. How long, O Lord, will you forget me? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? I don't know if you can relate to this, but I can relate to it so much. I know when I'm in a really hard place, this is how I feel. Sometimes I feel like how long, Lord, are you going to let me go through this? Haven't I learned my lesson? I get it. I've learned. Can I move on? I promise that I will take this lesson and I will apply it and blah, 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 like all the things. But I hold that space and I'm able to show up because it feels like this is what's real, God. Like I know the right things that if I was full of faith, should be feeling, but honestly, this is how I'm feeling. And as I'm throwing these things at God's feet, what happens is I start to see from a different perspective because he helps me pull me out of my grief and into his more kingdomly perspective. In the psalm here, I just find so much encouragement because I don't picture David coming, working it out on his own and then coming to God to then pray to him once he's got it all figured out. I honestly picture him just dropping to the floor, pounding his fists against the ground, sobbing, snobby, teary snobs, trying to process through what's going on, and he's just moaning. This might even just be a moan to God, like, how much longer, Lord? And I just love this because it shows that we can show up to God in the state that we are right now. We don't have to figure out things. We don't need to work it out and understand the truths completely before we actually show up to him. We can just be ourselves. So, what are some habits that you can implement? I wrote down a few things I just want to read through here. So, first of all, some habits to help you start to build awareness to what is really going on and show up to God as you truly are and work these messy emotions out with him. One thing that's helped me immensely has been quiet time in the morning. The morning is just a good time for me because my mind is fresh. I am usually coming off a good night's rest, and I have maybe something that I was trying to work out the night before, and I have a new perspective that next morning. So what I like to do is sit down, have some quiet and solitude. I need that quiet. Before my mind starts working, before I start to jump into anything for the day, I sit down there with the quiet and I enter into prayer with God, and I sit there and I start to read his word, truths that never change. And that time with him, it could be a verse that just starts to reveal so much to me. And I am able to be quiet with my thoughts and able to just really process through things with God. And it has been so, so key to my spiritual growth and my personal growth, because in that time, he reveals things through his word to me, things that I didn't even know I was wrestling with, but I needed that time, that space to really just process through it. So one tool is the quiet time in the morning, along with prayer or some sort of journaling practice, or just, another thing that I like to do is build in a devotional practice, a guided thing that helps me just keep on track. It could be something so small as like a daily reading. It doesn't take much time, but just to get us into God's word. So there's quiet time. A meditation, that is such a huge thing for me. It's one that I honestly have resisted for a long time because meditation isn't very easy. It's hard. We're like hardwired now to just keep busy and to go from one thing to the next, but meditation makes us slow down. And so for this tool, I recommend just starting small. Just, if it's 2 minutes, 5 minutes, work your way up from there. Just get quiet. And one tool that I like to use is the Abide app. This app is something that what it does is it takes one single verse from the Word of God, and it asks questions. It gives some context. It says it spoken word to you, and has you really think about like what word's sticking out to me, and then it brings in another translation. It just really helps you just wrestle and roll around one verse, and you'll be so surprised what can be pulled out of just something so simple like that. The third one, I kind of already touched on this, but journaling. And I know this sounds so corny because journaling, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to journal. I get you. but I want to push you on this because it's so, so, so helpful and informative. Journaling, what I mean by journaling, it can be something as simple as like opening up. This is what I do. I open up an app on my phone. It's a Google Doc, and I just say, "Dear God," and then I just like I emotionally pour out whatever's there. I don't think. I just say whatever's on my mind. I don't plan it. I don't try to seem flowery. This not only brings awareness what's going on, because there's so many things that are in us that just want to get out, but it also helps us practice this getting honest with God, because we're just showing up, we're just talking to him like he's a friend. And I think when you start to think of it more like that, then it starts to just feel a little bit more natural. And then this journaling process then helps to bleed into your prayer life so that you can just show up to God and start talking to him throughout the day. And that brings me to another tip is short breaks for silence and solitude throughout the day. So not just the quiet time in the morning, but also just build into your calendar, just 5-minute, 10-minute breaks. Maybe it's lunchtime, for instance, to just take some time to breathe, get up, take a stroll around the block or just on the floor of your building once this shelter in place is no longer in place. Just get up and move around and use that opportunity to just enter into prayer. And then lastly is just noticing your triggers. When you start to see yourself triggered by an emotion, bring it to God. It can be something as simple as, "God, I'm so anxious. Bring me your peace." That can be as whatever you need in that moment. It can be just so simple like that. Just start to bring awareness to what you're feeling, name it, bring it to God's feet, and just be honest about what you're truly, truly feeling. So friend, I know you've got this. Just start in the coming days, just start to think about, well, first of all, naming things when they come up for you. When you're starting to feel sad, just name it. Notice those triggers. And even if you do spiral into something that feels a little bit messy, like an emotional outburst, don't judge yourself for it. Just bring it to God. Try to understand, seek him to understand what led you to this outburst or what led to this emotion. Turn to God's word and help wrestle through it with him. Don't feel the need to have to show up or clean yourself up. Just show up as you are. And just really start thinking through, what are some of the tools? What are the ones that I mentioned? Do you want to start implementing into your days, into your weeks, to help you build more emotional awareness and closeness with God? All right, friend. Well, I will be talking to you again soon. Take care.